Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That is Andrew Erickson. And today's guest is Rich Hribar. And, of course, it is you. And today, it's all about the Week 4 starts and sits, the players on the bubble, the players that can make a difference, and the players that maybe you should think twice about. And we're going to break them all down for you today on the show. We are very excited to have you with us. It has been a very emotional week. It's been a lot going on, and the outpouring just continues. I'm getting messages after messages after message after message, and I just want to say thank you. All of us are getting overwhelmed with the incredible support from the listener base here at Fantasy Pros, and it's overwhelming in the best possible way. As somebody put it to me earlier in one of these many messages, what we're doing here now seems almost unimportant, and at the same time more important than ever. And I think that's the best way you could possibly put it. And Andrew, it's the first time you and I have gotten to talk on a show here since the untimely passing of our dear friend, Mike Tagliere. And I got to tell you, I'm sure you've seen what's going on in the industry as well. And Mike's had an impact on you just as much as he has on this entire industry as a whole.
Yeah, I spent Monday morning in tears while I was working out because it kind of had all hit me at once. It's kind of when I got went through my process emotionally. And the thing about Tags, and I got the luxury to meet him a couple of different times. And the first time I met him was actually in Nashville during the NFL draft. It was in 2019, 2 years ago. And the only reason I knew he was there was because I followed him on Instagram. And I was basically social media stalking him because I was trying to figure out, because I knew he was going to be at the draft. And I went to the draft because at this time I was not working full-time in fantasy, and I was trying to get in. I was trying to network, and I was like, all right, well, if I go to this draft, chances are I'll run into someone that I can talk to. So that's what I did. I just booked the flight, stayed at the draft, and I saw that he was there, at Jason Aldean's rooftop bar or something like that, and he's having a great time watching the draft. I think it was day 2 of the draft, and I'm like, all right, I got to go up there, and I'll just happen to bump into him and be like, oh, hey, I know you, and then strike up a conversation and kind of take things from there. So I get in, and I'm like, all right, let's go to this rooftop bar. The bouncer stops. He's like, hey, this is the cover. It's $100. I'm like, are you serious? It's $100 to go upstairs? I'm like, all right, it's worth it. I need to do this. It's worth it, because I was on a mission. Because I was like, no, I want to meet this person. I want to meet Mike Tagliere because I've listened to him religiously over the past couple of years, and I want to get a chance to meet him. And I did. I actually met him and his wife, Tabby, and I had a great time hanging out with them. And I honestly don't even... It was a great conversation I had with them, and I remember he gave a shout out to me on the podcast that they recorded after that draft, thanking me for coming and showing up and introducing myself. So he spoke a lot of great things, gave me a lot of good advice, and I really wouldn't be here today where I am without his a roadmap that he kind of laid out for me and the advice that I took. So it was a really fun night, and I won't ever forget. I remember he was lukewarm on the David Montgomery selection. That's
everything with the Bears was lukewarm at best when it came to Tags.
That was one of the things I remember vividly, because it was honestly just, the drinks were flowing. It was a really fun night, and I don't even actually remember ever leaving Mike Tagliere. I kind of woke up in my hostel, and I was like, all right, well, I need to go home now, so let's do this. But yeah, he, similar to Yates's take with Mike Tagliere, is that he was a mentor towards me. Someone that I went to when I had questions about, what is it like to work full-time in fantasy football? I know a lot of people do it as a side job, as a hobby, and then when they make the flip to full-time, it's really different. It's not the same thing, and there's no guide to, okay, this is how you be a full-time fantasy football analyst. You can't just, Google it, how to. It's very unique, it's very niche, and, Mike was someone that I leaned on a lot when I had questions about, what are salary expectations? I don't even know. You can't just look it up on Glassdoor. That doesn't work that way. So,
no. We're not even sure these positions exist right now that we're doing. None of us are sure that this is all real life. But so you're right. I mean, Tags has always been, and it's funny because he had more mentors in this business as well. And I know, like myself, also had some great mentors. And I feel like when you have that, you kind of feel the necessity to pass that along and kind of help that next group coming up. And I know you're one of those people in my mind, always have been. And it's so nice to hear that story because I know, Tags and I had those people for us. So the fact that he could be that person for you, or, some of us can do that for other people, I think that's huge, Andrew.
Yeah. So I'm going to miss him a lot. I already do. And I just hope that, I continue to put out great work because I know that he would be really proud of me and where I've come and how far I've come, and if I continue to grow as an analyst and just as a person, because at the end of the day, as great as an analyst he was, he was an even greater friend. So,
Rich, I don't want to put you on the spot at all, but I know that you also mentioned that you had something that you had written this week as well, and it's just, like I said, just overwhelming, incredible outpouring from the industry and support and love and celebration of the work, the man, all of the above when it comes to tags. And I'll just step away for a second and give you the floor here, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely hit me this weekend because me and Mike definitely have so much overlap in just our path to get here. I remember meeting Mike in the summer of 2015 at a flex draft in DC, the flex drafts that Jake holds, where I've met you both times, Joe, the times we've hung out in person. And we're the exact same age, me and Tags. We met. We were both still working at our full-time jobs, just trying to asking each other, like, how do we get into this space? How do we do this? He was with Tabby, and, she was with him every step of the way, and, kind of saying, like, this is what he wants to do. I just want to be there for, my best friend and, help him achieve what the goals he wants to have in life. And my wife was the same way. I remember being say, hey, like, I'm already doing this as a career for our family. Like, you want me to go do this thing for a hobby, and make it, like, what happens if I can't do it in 2 years? And she was like, who cares? Like, it's what you want to do. And, Tabby had that same kind of push for Tags, and you can see the kind of devotion they had for each other. And it was really transparent that day. And I remember specifically talking about Andre Williams of the Giants. We had a conversation of all people, that's how you remember these things. But I remember Tags was so just genuinely happy to be there and meet everybody that he went home and did a short 15, 20-minute podcast on just meeting everybody and specifically called out every person by name and the conversation that they had. That was the kind of guy he was, he was just, unapologetically himself. He always wore his heart on his sleeve. And I think that is something that's a lot of people can take away from him. He was a hard worker and was himself. And, if you just do those two things, you're going to always kind of get to where you need to go in life. And, we can all use those qualities today. I know I still work on a lot of those things. But, his same thing. We both ended up kind of getting full-time jobs at the same time. Just very much a similar overlap on our arc to get here. And to see him kind of now be pulled away from this, while I still get to do it is, kind of really heart-wrenching, and really put a lot of things in perspective this weekend, with my family and kind of stuff. So I'm very grateful to still have, been able to meet Tags and have him kind of touch my life. And you see it's that kind of stories that everyone has said, they're all a little bit different, but the fabric of them are all the same, the kind of person he was to everybody. So, definitely is a real tough time right now for everybody in the industry because Tags was a guy that was just a friend to everybody. I mean, he had no enemies. He had no enemies at all. And it's really tough to kind of, lose him at this time. But, yeah, I mean, it's really tough, man, to get through. And still, it's so fresh still. But, yeah. I mean, I know did this for a few days. But yeah.
Well, hey, man, we've been living through it for a few months, which has been, and as I said on Saturday when we did the tribute show, and I know some people on the YouTube channel were looking for the tribute show. It's not on YouTube. We did not do it on video. So if you missed it and you want to hear it, you have to go over to the podcast version only. That's where it is. But, I always spoke to my students when I was teaching about, forget deserve. You could do a lot of good work and all this stuff. Forget about what you deserve. Just keep earning it. And whenever I think of Tags, I think of somebody just earned it. He earned everything that he got by the hard work, and he earned so much respect, not only for the work, but then the kind of human he was to everyone else in the industry he worked with. So what you're seeing here is something that was well earned, and he deserves it, but he deserves it because of how much he earned it at every single turn, at every single step, at every single interaction. So this is, in a weird way, been incredibly therapeutic to talk about my friend and to talk football at the same time. And that's what we're going to do today, just as I did the last couple days. And we're going to keep on doing it here. So we're going to get through all the start sits and we're going to do all that good stuff. And we're going to try to have some fun here today because God knows we need to smile a little bit. And
just look at the teddy bear.
It is. By the way, when you went to that bar, Andrew, did you have your fake ID? I don't know how they let you in.
That's how I got. How else do you think I got in?
I was going to say, McLovin was definitely
It's a Utah ID that I use.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Works like a charm.
Yeah, who's this Josh Gordon fellow trying to get into the bar that I see here? That was your name on your fake ID. Anyway, before we jump into things here on the show, as we always do, I want to remind everybody, go to fantasypros.com right now /contest. And you can get involved in that Kyler Murray giveaway we have right now. An autographed Kyler Murray football. He could be the MVP this year for all we know. Thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction, we are giving that away to one of our listeners. All you got to do is go to fantasypros.com /contest, write a review of the show, and all you have to do then, screenshot that bad boy, and go to fantasypros.com /contest. Enter the contest. After you're entered once, you're entered the rest of the year. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com /fantasypros, you click subscribe, you click the notifications bell, you get 3 times the entry if you're a YouTube subscriber into the contest. So go, what are you waiting for? And get yourself that Kyler Murray football, please. We want to give away some free stuff. And also, while you're at it, make sure you sync your team and all your teams over to My Playbook at fantasypros.com /myplaybook. And of course, they've got that autopilot feature, which is the greatest thing ever. Rich and I were just talking before the show about, when you got your kids, you're trying to do a million things and you have lineups and guys are in and out of games. What that will do is automatically manage your team. If somebody's out, if there's something that needs to change, all of a sudden it will change it for you. It'll send emails of suggestion lineup changes. It'll auto swap inactive players, all of that. And let's be honest, we all have lives, most of us. Not Andrew. He's just by the computer 24 hours a day. But for those of us who do, it is a great feature that you can utilize over at My Playbook. And My Playbook is the only place to get autopilot to help run all of your teams when you are not available. It's a fantastic feature you should take advantage of. And while we have everybody here, let's take advantage of the knowledge. And let's start with the running backs. We're going to break them down for you. Before we get to the guys on the fringe, who we may or may not want to start or sit this week, I want to talk about the guys that are obviously starting in the top 20 that maybe we have a little bit of hesitancy about for whatever reason. So Andrew, let's start with you. Who are you a little concerned with this week in the top 20 at running back? Maybe you're not taking them out of a lineup, but you're trying to build a lineup thinking that maybe this won't be the best matchup for them.
For me, it's Chris Carson. I think that he's kind of underwhelmed based on his, workhorse role that he should have as the Seattle Seahawks starting running back. The receiving game or the receiving workload has really not been there for him. He only has 5 receptions through 3 games. This is a guy that we saw used a lot in the passing game last year. He was catching touchdowns left and right from Russell Wilson, and he was kind of had this all-encompassing skill set that we thought, okay, this is like a legit bell cow you could get in the 4th or 3rd round of fantasy draft. So I was all over Chris Carson in season-long leagues, drafting him, feeling good about him as an RB1 if I went wide receiver heavy to start the draft, but he's already hurt his hamstring. So that's kind of why he missed a couple series in the game that they last played. We saw Alex Collins take a couple drives, and that's Chris Carson's bugaboo. The dude has never stayed healthy an entire year, and now he's already dealing with a hamstring injury. Again, they said it was cramps, but we know those two things are related. It's because he's not hydrated, and that's what's causing him to get cramps, which is causing him to get a hamstring injury. So there's clearly a problem here, and the targets are not necessarily, when you look at the usage, 43% routes run per dropback rate, not good. He's not running a lot of routes when Russell Wilson is dropping back to throw. So that's kind of the contributing factor to why he's not seeing so many targets in the passing game. So I don't necessarily think that the matchup is bad against the 49ers. I do think it's not as good as if you look at just raw fantasy points against, because it's really heavily inflated towards that first game against the Detroit Lions when Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift scored 1 million points against the 49ers. So I don't think that the 49ers defense is just, bottom 5, run defense. I think they're actually weaker in their secondary. I think that's where Russell Wilson kind of take advantage. So Chris Carson, he's kind of had middling production, but I think that he's a guy I would look to try to trade. I know you guys talked about trades yesterday, but I think that he's an interesting sell high guy because he is kind of viewed as a starting running back, but he's not really seeing a top 10 type of usage that I'd like to see from my bell cows.
All right, Rich, let's talk about running back inside the top 20 that you have concerns with, that you might be fading this week a little bit, depending on matchup, health, or maybe all the above.
Well, we all need running back production, so I don't know if we're outright fading anybody that's touching the ball, across our leagues, but definitely some concerns. I mean, I think that, there's some excitement about Saquon this week, but I do think that there are some concerns, especially in this particular matchup, on the road in New Orleans, their first home game that they'll actually have this year. He was a full go last week, 86% of the team snaps. He had 22 touches and 94 yards, but still just 3.2 yards per carry. We haven't really seen the Giants run the ball effectively at all, at all this entire season. He's going up against the Saints defense that has allowed 100-yard rusher in the past 2 years. They've come out this year, they're allowing 2.5 yards per carry to running backs. It's a situation where we're going to need the injuries to Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton to kind of funnel him back those 7 targets that he got last week, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of production on the ground for Saquon. So if you're in these non-full PPR leagues, I think that Saquon's really going to kind of be a guy that I'm going to treat more as a volume-based RB2 this week than a guy that is just going to be full-fledged back into being a guy that I'm going to be handling as just an RB1, strictly based on him kind of getting into the box against the Falcons last week.
I had actually had somebody on the list, and I'm actually going to change it because as the day went on, I kind of found somebody else I'm even more concerned with. So Miles Sanders is the one that I'm getting more concerned with. The last 2 weeks, RB in half PPR finished RB 37 and then 38. That's no bueno. It is not good. I know he only had 2 carries, and I would expect they would try to get him the football more against Kansas City. The only problem is right now, what kind of game is that probably going to shape up to be? My imagination would tell me that it's going to be a game script where they're going to have to try to throw the football and keep pace with Patrick Mahomes, because that's what Patrick Mahomes does. So that's not necessarily a good solution for getting more carries into the hands of Miles Sanders. So that's a guy that is in that top 20, but for me this week, I definitely have concerns with. It's going to be tough, as Rich said, to take him out of any lineup, but at the same time, I think we have to understand expectations. Maybe you have to make up for that deficit by playing somebody with a little bit more boom, maybe, when it comes to the flex spot. And when we're looking for a little bit more boom with these guys on this fringe here, let's talk about some of these guys on the fringe of the running back / flex world. And let's start with Zack Moss for a second here. Zack Moss, a pretty good showing last week, Andrew. Is he starting to get into the good graces where you feel good about starting Zack Moss? He's RB27 in the expert consensus rankings over on FantasyPros. Good matchup against Houston. What are your thoughts on Moss this week?
I love him. I love Zack Moss this week. I love Zack Moss in season-long leagues because I thought that he could carve out a role as the goal line back. And I know a lot of people were drawn to, no, Josh Allen's the goal line back. But when I looked at the snaps last year, when Zack Moss was healthy, Zack Moss was the guy. And so far this year, that's kind of been the exact same thing. Josh Allen's not really, he's not running nearly as much. And we're seeing Zack Moss take on more carries inside the 10-yard line. Only Derrick Henry has more carries inside the 10-yard line than Zack Moss does over the past 2 weeks. Zack Moss could even have more if he wasn't inactive in week 1 for some reason. They said he wasn't healthy, but he wasn't on the injury report. So I don't know what was going on there, but Zack Moss is healthy now, and he looked really good running the football last week. He was one of PFF's highest graded rushers, 8th highest ranked PFF rushing grade through 2 weeks, 78.0. And, his expected fantasy point output is top 20. So he's also getting involved in the passing game, which I love to see. And I just think that Devin Singletary is just a guy at this point. Like, he's had chances to be the guy. And all they do is just give the ball more to other players and feature Zack Moss. So the touchdown equity is apparent. We know that the Bills are going to score a ton of points, especially against the Texans. I believe that they're 15.5-point favorites. They're going to get chances to be able to run up the ball. Houston is bad against running backs, 4th most fantasy points allowed. And Houston's kind of more of a run funnel defense. Like, they're letting teams run the football on them. Now, it's not to say that the Bills are going to necessarily play into that, because the Bills like to throw all day, every day, which is fine. But I think that, with the score in hand, I think that Zack Moss is set up in positive game script to have a really decent outing here. So I think he's a startable asset this week.
Rich, when we get past Zack Moss at 27, we have Tyson Williams, Lenny Fournette, Jamal Williams, and then Trey Sermon at 31. And Trey Sermon's got a great matchup on paper against Seattle, who's given up a ton of rush yards. But yet, at the same time, it's very difficult to learn to love again when it comes to Kyle Shanahan. Is Sermon startable for you this week, or any of the above-mentioned Tyson Williams, Fournette, Jamal Williams, that you feel like this week you feel good about putting them in your lineup?
Yeah, the 49ers situation I think is interesting. So we're going to need a lot more clarity. We need to find out if Elijah Mitchell's going to be back or not. I don't really think Elijah Mitchell did anything to play himself out of opportunity in that game against Philadelphia when they still had Brandon Graham in that game. So I would expect Elijah Mitchell, if he's healthy enough to play, to be involved in the offense to some degree, maybe even possibly just walk right back into being the bell cow the way they used Trey Sermon on Sunday night. Trey Sermon did kind of go through concussion protocol throughout the week, so he might not have had the full install, in terms of, game plan. So maybe that played a role, but they clearly didn't trust Trey Sermon, at all in that game. So, it's really tough to say now that he's just the starting for 49ers running back. We feel good about that. we're going to need some more of a sample of him getting some volume to really have us feel good, I think, about if you have Trey Sermon. I don't think he did anything to come out of Sunday night to say, like, all right, I've got this guy now. It's all back to square one. We're feeling good. So definitely some work to be done at the 49ers backfield. Hey, you saw, too, they turned Kyle Juszczyk the most touches he's ever had his NFL career. So, like, there's a lot still here that needs to be hashed out in the 49ers backfield. We'll see, what happens with Jeff Wilson when he comes back in IR, how it's going to shake out, too. But I would say if Elijah Mitchell's out, that conversation extends. The other situation I'm looking to kind of see how it plays out too is if Josh Jacobs is back this week, because if not, we're going to have the miraculous Peyton Barber is back kind of in everyone's kind of graces. I think he's going to be another objectively kind of good play this week. So you look at Brandon Staley's defenses, or if Josh Jacobs comes back, whatever Raider is the early down grinder, you look at this Brandon Staley defense. So what they do is they play a lot of shell coverage, 2 high safeties. They leave you with light boxes. They invite you to run. That's what they want teams to do. If you look at Antonio Gibson in week 1, he just 5% of his carries came against light boxes. Not a single carry Clyde Edwards-Helaire had last week came against a heavy box. And just 5 of the Cowboys carries, 29 carries between Ezekiel and Tony Pollard came against a heavy box. So they're going to invite teams to run, and teams are running all over them. It's fine. You let teams run on you. Don't let teams beat you through the air. So, I mean, if that happens on Monday night, the strength of the Raiders' offense so far to start the season has been the vertical passing game. It's crazy that Derek Carr is manifested into like the kind of the mad bomber of the NFL, but that's where we are right now. He leads the league in fantasy points on throws over 15 yards downfield. The Chargers are the number 1 defense against those types of targets, and if you roll that back into last year, Brandon Staley's defense at the Los Angeles Rams was number 1 in that same category. It's what the defense is designed to do. They want teams to run the football, and they're going to invite you to run the football. Now, a team like the Cowboys built like a great game plan around that with their 2 combo backs and their offensive line. Can the Raiders do that? It remains to be seen. But whoever's in that role, if Josh Jacobs comes back or if Peyton Barber still gets another shot, that player is going to basically be like a fringe RB2 and like a volume-based RB2 that you can kind of get into lineups this week.
Well, speaking of some of the guys you just touched on, let's play a little game here, and we're going to use our little Who Should I Start tool, which is over for free at fantasypros.com/start, and it's a little player comparison tool that allows us to discuss some of these guys here. So I've got one for you. The matchup of Trey Sermon with the concern of how much of the workload he gets, or Tony Pollard, who you were just kind of touching on recently there. Rich, who would you rather start?
Yeah, that's pretty close. I'd probably still just start Pollard for the upside splash play, unless Elijah Mitchell's out. Maybe it would change my mind. Not to go on like this huge diatribe about Tony Pollard versus Trey Sermon, but what's interesting about the Cowboys to start the year is that Kellen Moore has called specific game plans based on the defenses that they've played. So the last 2 weeks they've played 2 really heavy zone-based, high safety coverage teams. Jonathan Gannon comes from like the Matt Eberflus tree. He worked with Mike Zimmer. The Eagles are no longer a man coverage team. They just sit back in zones. They do the same thing. They just gave the Cowboys just light box after light box last week, and the Cowboys were like, cool, we're just going to keep running it. And it's what happened in week 2 when they faced the Chargers. So it'd be interesting to see if teams just specifically approach the Cowboys like that, or they just ran into 2 teams that play like that against everybody, because the Panthers are kind of a little mixed bag under Phil Snow. They do a little bit of everything. You see a lot of 3-3-5 wide, a lot of zone blitzing. Now that they've got actual cornerbacks, and they did lose J.C. Horn, but they bring in C.J. Henderson this year. They're running a little bit more man than they did last year too, because they're sending a lot of heat. They're blitzing a lot more this year. So it's gonna be interesting to see if the Cowboys have a different type of game plan, because the 2 teams that they just faced really kind of acquiesced to saying, hey, line up and run the football on us. We're going to let you do it. So it's be interesting to see if the Cowboys have a team that's going to bring more pressure on them, like the Panthers will, if they get back to kind of pushing the ball kind of vertically again. We'll see, because Tony Pollard's still a guy that's only his usage still, like, he's not really running any routes for the team, and all of his touches are kind of scripted touches. They're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
but
not
that
like
script seems to be going for 7 yards every time.
But I mean,
it's a heck of a script there, Rich.
He's getting a lot of those. He's getting a lot of those zone runs. Not like Zeke's gobbling up all the gap runs. Because Zeke's a good interior runner. And eventually, if you run into a team where you're not scripting those types of plays, like he did in Week 1 when they fell behind against the Bucs, like then you see he's just not on the field anymore. So it's kind of a mixed bag with Pollard. I'm not quite to the point yet where I think he's like a weekly flex-worthy type of option, but I'm definitely not there with Trey Sermon either. But I do think that the Cowboys are an interesting conversation, just because Kellen Moore, I think, has done really one of the best coaching jobs 3 weeks into the season.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see also, what that Panthers D is really made of now, because the first three matchups have been very good to give them all the numbers. Right now, you go look at the numbers, and this is the danger of the early season, right, Andrew, is the small sample size and what that sample size really is, considering you're playing teams like the Jets and the Houston Texans. And yeah, it's really easy to come out looking absolutely fantastic and smelling like roses defensively against those teams, but playing Dak Prescott with all these weapons with the Cowboys might be a little different. Andrew, I want to switch gears to another type of running back here, especially for those PPR format folks out there. Nyheim Hines or J.D. McKissic, who would you rather start this week? McKissic obviously has a pretty good matchup on paper, at least, because Atlanta defensively has not been great, despite whatever the Giants made them look like last week. And Nyheim Hines coming off a fine performance as well. They're traveling to Miami this week. So who would you rather start, Hines or McKissic?
I'm going to go with Nyheim Hines, despite the fact that J.D. McKissic started last week for the Washington football team, which, again, is just pouring it on for people that were waiting for the Antonio Gibson breakout season. I just think it looks like that Hines is just, he's part of the Colts identity on offense. They just don't have a lot of weapons to work around, where McKissic, he could not be involved whatsoever. If they're not in the 2-minute drill, he's like not playing for the most part. Like, that's where he's getting seemingly the majority of his touches, and it just so happens that the offense happens to be on the field in the 2-minute drill. So that's why McKissic's getting more playing time. But we saw at least last week, Antonio Gibson popped in the screen game. He actually should have caught another touchdown, but he just totally dropped it on a pass near the goal line. So for me, McKissic just seems more like an afterthought. Like, he had that one game, but it was just because of the way that the game script played out. He was so involved, where Hines, he got goal line. He got touches near the goal line. And that's super annoying for anyone that is invested in Jonathan Taylor, but he's just more featured in this offense than McKissic is. There's just more options to go with the ball to, whether it's Logan Thomas, whether it's Terry McLaurin. Washington has better options around him, whereas Hines, it's like, okay, there's Michael Pittman, Zach Pascal gets his 2 end zone targets every single week, and then there's really not much else. So I like Hines.
Rich, when you're looking at the rest of these running backs, is there anybody on that fringe or outside of RB2 in that flex area that you have a good feeling about this week, that you think you like the matchup? Or, obviously Peyton Barber might be one of those guys that we just kind of touched on, but is there anybody else that you really feel good about? If you need some extra points, maybe this guy can get it done?
Yeah, the people are on Zack Moss. He'd be kind of those guys that, you probably have like either on your bench or you haven't really played yet that looks like that. I will say that I don't know what's going to happen with Darrell Henderson, but he has the same injury Cam Akers had last year, and Cam Akers ended up missing 2 weeks. So if it is Sony Michel's job again, he played 74% of the snaps. He had 23 touches and 80 yards against a good Bucs defense. Now he's going against in a high total shootout environment in this Arizona Rams game. In Arizona, after they played really well against Derrick Henry in week 1, they've really been shredded the past 2 weeks, allowing 176 yards to Minnesota backs and then 178 yards last week to Jacksonville running backs. So if Darrell Henderson's going to be out, Sony Michel, I think, is another guy that will definitely leap in the Fantasy Pros rankings. I think the top 20 guy for sure.
Yeah, that's what we call irony, when you stop Derrick Henry and nobody else, and all of a sudden James Robinson and Carlos Hyde run over you. Andrew, how about any sits for you? Are there any other guys on this fringe that you don't like the matchups? Is it somebody like a Tyson Williams or somebody like that kind of scares you this week?
Yeah, it's Tyson Williams. It's tough to go back to a guy that got 5 carries against the Lions. Like, we were expecting a really good week from Tyson Williams.
Yeah, we were. Yes, we. I will use that collective we there, Andrew.
It looked like he was set up. Again, we knew it was a timeshare. It wasn't just his backfield. He'd been seeing around 50% of the snaps, and that's what he played against the Lions. But I don't know why the Ravens decided, hey, we're just going to air the ball out with Lamar Jackson against a really, against a Lions defense that you can run the football on. Now, they should have been able to throw the football as well, and they did. If Marquise Brown had just caught some of the passes, it would have worked out much better. But you can't really go back to a player that is so much in the time. They even got Devontae Freeman. He had 3 carries. Latavius Murray had 7 carries. And with Murray kind of getting the slight lean on goal line touches inside the 5-yard line, it's really hard to trust Tyson Williams. I know that he's kind of the receiving back, but in a Lamar Jackson-led offense, there's really not a lot there as well. So, and then you just throw in the fact that they're playing Denver, who's one of the better defenses. I know they haven't played a lot of opponents that have been really that great, but they have a good defense on paper, good run defense, solid playmakers across the board. So I don't think this is going to be a game where we can expect the Ravens to just ground and pound, run the football, especially when they didn't do it last week against a much easier opponent. So probably out on Tyson.
Before we shift gears over to the wide receivers, we should probably replenish ourselves with a big bowl of Magic Spoon. That's right, because Magic Spoon is that thing where you're looking for to cut down on your carbs and the sugar and the unhealthy foods, especially at breakfast time, because Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, and it's only 140 calories. Is why Andrew likes it so much when he goes to the gym. He always has a big bowl of Magic Spoon right before. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb, but it is not taste-free. It is delicious, and all of the flavors there. You can choose and custom bundle yourself. You got cocoa, you got fruity, you got frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, cinnamon, cookies and cream, and maple waffle. I personally like the cookies and cream one. I've got the box sitting in the cupboard right now. But if you want to get a box in your cupboard and make sure that you are eating better and taking better care of yourself and at the same time have it actually taste good, then go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros to get a custom bundle of cereal and try it today. And be sure to use that promo code FantasyPros when you do at checkout to save $5 on your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. My goodness, if life only came with that. So, you don't like it for any reason, doesn't matter. They'll refund your money, no questions asked. Just get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Use that promo code FantasyPros to save $5. Thank you very much, Magic Spoon, for making all of our lives a little bit better. So go out there and get yourself a bowl today. All right, let's move on here to the next position, and it's a wide receiver position. Certainly lots of moving parts here, gentlemen. Rich, I'm going to start here with you on this one. Who are you a little concerned with when it comes to guys in the top 30 at wide receivers? These are wide receivers that are ranked and probably going to start on most teams, but you're a little concerned with the matchup or with the player right now.
Well, one of the things I'm really watching early in the season, especially for this matchup too, is just kind of what's going on with DeAndre Hopkins early in the season. You know, he's got the 3 touchdowns, kind of masking a little bit of what's going on with his production, but he's 42nd at the position in targets. He's 34th in receptions. He's 42nd in yardage. You go back to this offense last year, and it was typically all the Cardinals did as they would go 3-by-1 and then ISO DeAndre Hopkins on the left-hand side of the field. If he was in man coverage, he ran basically either like a slant or a comeback, and they just jammed him with the target automatically. And then if he was double covered, they would basically run like a smoke to the other side. But now we're seeing the ancillary kind of depth of this offense kind of really all contributing and kind of like really kind of coming together, which didn't happen last year. And other guys are kind of mushing these kind of targets for Hopkins. He's basically a guy that lived on all this volume last year. He's not a guy, he's past the age apex. He's also a guy that doesn't really separate. He's always been kind of a clasher at a boundary big-time boundary threat receiver. So, I mean, he wouldn't be the first guy to kind of, it to come quick. We're not there yet. But then also he's facing this Rams defense that he really wasn't effective against last year either. I mean, he had just 8 catches for 52 yards and had 13 targets in that game. And the other game he had 4 for 35 with 10 targets. Granted, Chris Treveler played a good portion of that second game, so grain of salt in that last one. The Rams really haven't used Jalen Ramsey as shadow guys. I don't really think that that's kind of much of a concern. But I'm just curious to see if this usage sticks, because the Cardinals are getting a lot more contributions from non-DeAndre Hopkins, wide receivers right now. And he's a guy that you already seen. The field has kind of moved off of kind of as a consensus wide receiver 1 already. It's be interesting to see if he gets back there, because I think a lot of people that are rostering him still got those touchdowns and are still kind of feeling that he is that kind of consensus wide receiver 1.
All right, Andrew, before the show, you mentioned that I was getting past my age apex as well. I disagreed with you heartily. Now I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Rich. Who is in the wide receiver top 30 this week that worries you a little bit?
For me, it's Chase Claypool. Again, when you're attached to Ben Roethlisberger, you're gonna have some concerns. Okay, so Big Ben is PFF's 33rd ranked quarterback. Again, there are 32 teams in the NFL. He's 33rd in terms of clean pocket grading. So looking at him from a clean pocket, so no pressure, because most quarterbacks are bad under pressure anyway. He is literally worse than 32nd when he's in a clean pocket. So nothing good is happening with Ben Roethlisberger when he has the ball in his hands. Nothing good is happening. So last week we saw Chase Claypool get a 26% target share. That was without Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster playing. Deontay didn't miss the entire game, and Juju missed most of the game because he got hurt with a rib injury. So we kind of saw Claypool take on the Deontay Johnson role as run like a short route, and Big Ben's just going to throw it to you in under 2 seconds. Basically what the offense has kind of been the past 2 seasons. Deontay could come back, or Juju could come back. So one of those guys.
that was like the remix of the Start Sit Show. Can we clip that? Yeah, Juju could come back. Juju could come back. Oh, yeah, that was really good. I like that. That's a good beat.
Yes.
I just want you to know, if you hear that beat later on today, that's where it got swiped from everybody.
Juju on the beat. Got it.
Juju on the down low.
Juju on the down low. So I have concerns if one of those guys comes back to the offense. I don't know if we're going to see Claypool command such a large target share for the second straight week. I know that we saw Najee Harris get a lot of targets, 19 targets to be exact, in week 3. So, and then he might also get some Jair Alexander against the Green Bay Packers. So we have a situation where, okay, if it's just Claypool, we should expect targets, but how efficient are they going to be? And is Alexander going to be covering him more because they know he's like the clear alpha in the offense? And then if Deontay and Juju come back, okay, where are his targets coming from now?
Right.
So,
it's almost like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a weird catch-22 situation for him.
Yeah, so I have concern because I love the talent of Chase Claypool, but when you're attached to, I think it's pretty obvious that we can kind of see like the end is coming with Big Ben, and how long we have to wait till it just kind of finally hits a cliff where this guy can't do anything. Like none of these receivers are playable. Like Harris is 1 yard per carry, and it's like Harris has like 10 catches for 10 yards. Like I'm afraid that we're going to hit that wall eventually, and that's why I have concerns about Claypool.
Well, yeah, upsetting a lot of people. We're going to cry in their terrible towels if you keep talking that way. For me, it's Brandin Cooks at Buffalo. And I know Brandin Cooks has been all world these first few weeks. So believe me, I get it. I think it's fantastic. But I've also looked ahead a little bit at the schedule too. But looking at Buffalo right now, I mean, they've only given up 50 whole total receptions so far. Only 582 yards receiving as a defense. And that secondary has been good for years. Last year, they struggled a little bit at times, but they're playing very well now. They've seemed to have tightened up after that first game a little bit where they were kind of in a dogfight with Pittsburgh out of the gate, and they've looked terrific ever since. So this is going to be, I think, a tough matchup because, once again, that secondary hits hard, too. Guys like Poyer, I mean, those guys hit. So I think that's a little bit different scenario out there. So I'd be a little bit worried about Brandin Cooks. He's been very good up until now. This is a really tall order here for Houston at Buffalo. Let's talk about some of these guys on the fringe. I want to start with one of my favorite guys, Robby Anderson. Let's talk about Robby Anderson for a second. Rich, I'm trying to remind everybody that last year, everybody was, including me, very excited about DJ Moore. And for the first, month and change of the season, basically, we were like, where's DJ Moore? He had one great game, and then after that, it was just kind of searching for DJ Moore. And Robby Anderson was the go-to guy. And I feel like the early game script so far, the Carolina Panthers just haven't had to push the football very much. I mean, they've had most of these games kind of in hand for the most part. But it feels like Robby Anderson's going to eventually pick things up. But in this matchup this week, is this the week you can make the case for it? Because theoretically, Dallas is a team that's going to put up points. They are not the Jets. They are not the Houston Texans. Do you think this is a week where you could start Robby Anderson? And if you don't, is this the week that he gets all those points, but they're on your bench?
I mean, if you can't start him here and give him one more shot, then I don't know if you're ever going to want to try again, because you kind of touched on everything that kind of brings everything full circle, right? They're going to have to score points. They're on the road. They don't have Christian McCaffrey either in the lineup. Also, when you look at the Cowboys, like they've kind of thrown Trayvon Diggs at the number one wide receiver a lot, and these ancillary kind of sub receivers have gone off against them. Antonio Brown had 5 for 121 against them. Whichever, I don't know if you want to call, Mike Williams, kind of that wide receiver 2 now at the start, he's sad, but he kind of hit against them while Keenan Allen hit. And even on Monday night, even though there wasn't like a great wide receiver performance, Jalen Reagor was the most productive wide receiver out of the Eagles, wide receiving group. He had 5 catches for 53 yards, at least a serviceable PPR game for a floor game. So if you can't play him here, then I don't really know like a scenario you're really going to talk yourself into again. What happened with Anderson though is just the role change is back. He's not in the same role that he was in last year when they had Teddy and they were an intermediate passing team. The A-Dot's back over 20 yards. He's basically a downfield threat again. While they got religion and they're using DJ Moore as an actual, full field wide receiver. So we were doing the same thing last year. We were shaking our heads like, why are you using DJ Moore strictly like this? He's more than this. Did you not watch the first 2 years of his career? And what are you guys doing? And they're finally using DJ Moore as that full field asset. So they're doing what we want them to do with DJ Moore, and Robby Anderson's kind of fallen back into this like tertiary lid lifting role. The only thing to kind of look out for too is that Terrace Marshall Marshall did get a lot more playing time to last week for the first time, so he can still kind of, we can have his role extend, and maybe we never get Robby Anderson to kind of full-fledged. But I think he's an interesting kind of like DFS like stacking option in that game. Maybe a wide receiver.
Said that. I literally this morning as I'm putting together DFS content, I'm looking at it. I'm saying the same thing you just said. You just verbalized it. If it's not this week, then we've really got a problem here. Like this, everything lines up where this should happen, and the negativity with the roster percentage is going to be mind-blowingly good. Like we're talking probably 1% roster to 2% roster because people are so sour right now, I feel like, on him.
Yeah, I mean, that's really kind of the short end of it, though. I mean, if you can't play him this week and give him another shot, then it's really probably never going to happen.
All right. Andrew, how about you when you're looking at the guys on the fringe of wide receiver 3? Who are the guys you want to start this week?
For me, it's Corey Davis. Again, it sounds weird, it sounds gross because of how bad the Jets have been this year so far with Zach Wilson. After we saw this pairing just create magic in the preseason, we were all I was drinking the Corey Davis Kool-Aid after a couple of preseason games when he got like targeted on half of his routes run. So, mistake on my part for that. But with Corey Davis, I think that it's getting. We saw last week. He had a command on the targets in the offense. He had 10 targets. He also saw the majority of the team air yards. It was actually top 10 in air yard share last week, and that was in a really tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. So we saw a tough matchup, and that's not the case in week 4. Like, he's playing the worst defense in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, or I think the third worst defense in the Tennessee Titans. It's a revenge game. Elijah Moore has a concussion. We don't know if he's going to play or be active. So Corey Davis should be the alpha in this offense, get back in that alpha chair, and you should see a ton of targets. So I like Corey Davis as a guy to go back to. He's going to see volume, and it's a good matchup. So those are the things I look for when I'm trying to figure out which wide receiver to play, and it sets up well for Corey Davis to have a productive outing. And again, revenge game.
How do you feel about the guys in Miami? Last week, Andrew, we had Jalen Waddle get a ton of targets. Will Fuller is back on the field now. How do you feel about both of those guys this week, starting them?
Well, I liked Will Fuller until I found out that he missed practice on Wednesday, so that's always great. But I will talk about, I still like Fuller, again, assuming that he's like 100% and he's healthy, because he was used downfield. He saw 8 targets, 69% routes run rate per drop back, 27th in expected fantasy points. So a pretty good outing for his first game back, and he could have had more. He left a lot of production on the table. He just missed a touchdown pass from Jacoby Brissett, but he was also targeted in the end zone on a 2-point conversion. So they were looking for him near the goal line and to score on those big plays. And that's what Will Fuller always does. He always has the splash play potential. That's why we always like him in DFS or as a guy that plays a wide receiver flex, because he has 40-point upside. Like, there's not a lot of guys that have that. So I know he's ranked very low in ECR. I think he's like outside the top 50 guys. Like, I have him in my top 30. I think I've got like 31 or 30. Because I see this Colts matchup. They have allowed the highest touchdown passing rate this year, and Fuller led the team in air yards last week. Like, those are the things I look for with some of these ancillary receivers, like who's seeing the downfield targets, like who's seeing the end zone targets. I write an article every week at pff.com that highlights high-value targets. So I look at end zone targets. I look at air yards, targets 20 yards downfield. And Will Fuller checks off all the boxes in those particular metrics. So I like Fuller a lot. Just praying that he's going to suit up and is healthy, which is always a big problem with him. But if he's healthy, I think that he has a ton of upside that's definitely not being reflected in the ECR ranking.
Rich, when you're looking at the fringe guys, maybe around the flex position for wide receivers this week, are there people that you want to start or sit in particular that really jump off the page to you?
I mean, looking at some of the guys that are down here, like in the wide receiver 35-ish area, I think Jakobi Meyers is another good spot if it's full PPR. I think you'll see a similar game script. What's interesting about the Patriots is that they signed these 2 tight ends, but if you look at their success rates per personnel usage, 12 personnel is one of their worst offenses right now that they're running. So I know it's only 3 games, but all-time backfire. They've been a lot more successful out of 11 personnel when they've had to go to it, and they haven't been in a lot of game scripts to go to it. But we saw it at the end of last week as well. But Joe, one game he's going to score a touchdown. There's going to be one time he's going to score a touchdown. I don't know when it'll be. It might not be this week.
All the regression is going to build up and he's going to have like 5 touchdowns in one game.
He has 2 passing touchdowns in his career. Can we get those to count? But he also has got a great matchup, I think, in the slot where he runs 81% of his routes. The Bucks, obviously since they lost, their starting slot cornerback Sean Murphy-Bunting, they've been playing, veteran Ross Cockrell there, and he's been getting roasted inside the slot. He's allowed 12 of 15 targets in his coverage to be completed, 2 touchdowns. So I do kind of like Jakobi Meyers. I don't think just last week was just fully on, jailbreak situation, but they'll also be in that again. They're 7-point dogs against, the Bucks, who are a complete pass funnel. So, we're not going to see any running of the football with Damien Harris in this game and Ramondre Stevenson, whoever else they have active. They're going to give Brandon Bolden touches again. Oh boy. But they're going to have to wing it, man. No matter what, Mac Jones is going to drop back more than they're willing to want him to drop back in the game plan in this game. So I do like Jakobi Meyers a little bit on that fringe there.
Yeah, I don't think Richard Sherman is the answer either, necessarily. Just putting that out there. I understand the reason for it and why they want to bring him in, but I don't know, man. Like you're saying, right now they're throwing that ball a lot on Tampa, and everybody seems to be able to do that. And also, I think you mentioned the personnel. I think that has to do with Mac Jones' comfortability too, and what he's accustomed to. That was, you get a lot more wide receivers running around Alabama than you do tight ends. It's just one of those situations when you watch the games, you kind of see that. Let's play another game too, since we talked earlier, and we're trying to use our fantasypros.com/start tool. Again, the Who Should I Start tool. Let's talk about Jakobi Meyers and Juju Smith-Schuster. Those are 2 guys pretty close to each other. I'm going to be careful here, though, Andrew. If it's Juju, just take your time if that's who you choose.
It will not be the Steelers slot wide receiver.
Okay.
See what I did there? I
see what you did there.
His name. Jakobi Meyers will be my option here. I think that he's the clear wide receiver one. He has 11 more targets than Nelson Aguilar. He's a 23% target share on the season, which is top 20. And like Rich alluded to, they're a pass funnel defense. Like the Patriots, their game plan this week is not, all right, we're going to feed Damien Harris 20 carries up the middle. Like that's not the plan. It's going to be like, all right, 4 wide, spread them out. Mac Jones, let's rip it, baby.
The Kendrick Bourne you can handle, boys and girls. All the Kendrick Bourne. Let's do another one here, Rich. This one's for you. Robby Anderson or Tim Patrick. This is an interesting one because Tim Patrick's been pretty solid, and the Ravens, in terms of giving up pass yardage, have been pretty bad to start the season here. So would you rather be starting Robby Anderson or Tim Patrick? And this is a real one that I feel like a lot of people are going to have this conversation with themselves.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, floor or ceiling, because Robby Anderson could be an absolute nothing still in your lineup. So, he could really boom or he could really bust. Where Patrick's kind of been like this, very kind of run-of-the-mill. He always finds a way to somehow either get in the end zone or flirt with 80 yards receiving somehow. He never gets a lot of targets, even going back to last year. He pumps out all these top 36 scoring weeks. He's like Zach Pascal of the Broncos.
Oh god, that's a perfect guy. It's absolutely,
because you look at, he hasn't had more than 5 targets in a game, but they're going to have to throw more probably this game because the first real opponent that's going to put them in neutral game script that they've had all year. You lose another wide receiver in KJ Hamler this week, so there's going to be a chance for a little bit of the targets to go up for Tim Patrick. He's always been productive when they go to him, so I think that he's got a really just a higher floor than Robby Anderson, but also probably doesn't necessarily get there in terms of ceiling where Robby can get to. So it just kind of comes down to that old corollary of hedging and saying, what do you really need? But I definitely would just, as an outright ranking, just rank Tim Patrick higher.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had a lot of teams these last 2 weeks where the flex positions look like Tim Patrick and Tony Pollard. And you know what? It hasn't been so bad. I've been holding my breath, but I got to tell you, we're getting by. We're getting by right now. That's what we're trying to do in week 4. It's been a ton of injuries these first few weeks to deal with. Let's switch gears for a moment to the quarterback position here. And first, let's talk about a quarterback that everyone's going to have to start this week, but maybe we don't feel great about. I'll actually start this one. Lamar Jackson, just because we're talking about Denver right now. Between the Hollywood drops, between the fact they're going against Denver, and Denver's another one of these teams like Carolina where, all right, let's see how they look as we get to some better teams that they have to play. It's easy to look 3-0 against lesser teams, and I think for the most part they played lesser teams, but you can only play who's on your schedule, and so far Denver has done just that. But Lamar needs some help. I don't know if Bateman's going to be active for the game this week. They're activating him for practice. That's a good thing. We'll see what kind of progress he makes, but Boy, oh boy, it just feels like Lamar just needs some help. Between Mark Andrews not catching the football sometimes, between 3 incredible drops from Hollywood Brown that I don't know how he could possibly show his face in the locker room on Tuesday. But Andrew, is there a quarterback for you that you're a little concerned with who is going to be a top 12 option that maybe might not perform like it?
For me, it's Aaron Rodgers. Again, I think that when we had him ranked season long kind of on the outs in that like 10 to 12 range, I think was accurate because we all knew his touchdown production and rate was not going to sustain from last year into this year. And so far this year, his quarterback finishes are 34, 5, and 17. So yeah, he beat up the Lions and that was it. Like that's the only kind of performance he's had that's been worthy of a top 10 finish. And now like Pittsburgh's not, this extreme juggernaut that it's always been. The secondary is kind of weak, but they still have a good front. They can still generate pressure on the quarterback, and Rodgers hasn't been the same elite guy that we've seen every week. I mean, he hasn't been a top 10 quarterback more often than not. So ranking him, I think he's ECR like 11, I think is appropriate because there are a couple streamable guys that are kind of interesting that I could see the argument for going with one of those guys over Rodgers. So I'm not necessarily super excited to think Rodgers is going to be able to put up a top 5 performance considering he's only been able to do it once this year against the Lions.
Rich, how about you? Is there a quarterback in that top grouping that scares you a little bit this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll double down and just talk about Lamar, too. I think Lamar's definitely, even if you have Lamar, his rushing upside's so high that you're not going to ever bench him. But I definitely believe his ranking is way too high right now in initial rankings. Because you look at it, too, I mean, especially if Ronnie Stanley doesn't play against this defense, that's going to be another problem because Lamar's, real struggles have come under pressure this year. He's been pressured on almost 40% of his dropbacks. And under pressure, he's got a sub 45% completion rate and 6.5 yards per pass attempt. As opposed to kept clean, it's 69% and 9.9 yards per pass attempt. So going up against the better defense. He's also only had one QB1 performance out of the 3 games, and it was in that game against the Chiefs where you got all that rushing production. That outcome could still exist where you get all that rushing production, but I don't think he's going to run all over the Broncos like he did against the Chiefs in the second half of that game. So I definitely think he's the guy that stands out the most. I will say that I would have chosen Jalen Hurts, but there's going to be so many dropbacks in that game that he could probably get there. I will say this, just to vent on Nick Sirianni for a second. Nick Sirianni had this amazing game plan in week 1. Jalen Hurts as a rookie, his last 4 games last year, all he did was throw YOLO balls vertically down the boundaries. He led the NFL in A-dot and throwing to these guys that really couldn't get open. And then, so week 1, they come out and Jalen Hurts is the lowest A-dot in the NFL. They're getting the ball out of his hands. He's getting easy completions. They're letting all these guys create yak after the catch. The Eagles had the highest percentage of receiving yards off yak in week 1. Week 2, they come right back, and it's just like last year. He has the highest A-dot in the NFL. He struggles. He's just throwing vertical balls. Last week, they reined him in a little bit, but then they have this game plan where they just don't even try to establish any kind of neutral, balanced offense at all. And then I also don't understand why they're not using him in the designed run game at all. I mean, he leads all quarterbacks in scramble runs, but he's 8th in designed rushing attempts. Where is kind of helping Jalen Hurts out? I feel like Nick Sirianni the last 2 games has done Jalen Hurts absolutely no favors, and he's a guy that still is at the point of his career where he needs kind of offensive guidance and offensive leverage to kind of create instead of just needing the fourth quarter to get there in fantasy for us.
Immediately after the show, I'm changing all of my team names to YOLO balls. I just want everybody to know. I'm going to give you a list of names here on the fringe of QB1. You tell me who there's a streaming quarterback best option is. Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill against the Jets, Cousins against Cleveland at home, Derek Carr at the Chargers, Sam Darnold at Dallas, Joe Burrow at Jacksonville. Andrew, who is your favorite of the streaming QBs this week in that range?
I like Joe Burrow. I like Joe Burrow for the Cincinnati Bengals. We're starting to see him look 100% back from his injury. Like last week, he was running around against Pittsburgh Steelers. Like he didn't get a ton of rushing yards, but he was moving in the pocket. He was scrambling a little bit. And that's absolutely great to see from a player who's recovering or coming back from a major knee injury. So I know Joe Mixon actually dubbed it as, Joe's got his swag back. So absolutely love to see that from his running back has got his quarterbacks back there. So for me, I think the matchup is good against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, they rank 30th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 32nd in PFF pass rush grade. So they're not generating a lot of pass rush, a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So Joe Burrow is going to have all day to throw. He's got weapons. Hopefully T. Higgins plays, but look, Jamar Chase has been an absolute stud on the outside of the first-round pick, and Tyler Boyd is super consistent over the middle of the field. And they got Joe Mixon as an option out of the backfield, along with some of their other running backs as well. So Joe Burrow, I think that last week he was PFF's highest-graded quarterback, and I think that continues to play out here on Thursday night against a pretty weak Jacksonville Jaguars defense.
Rich, when it comes to Superflex, I'm going to give you who should I start? Big Ben or Mac Jones? Who would you rather start if you had to?
Oh boy. Oh man. I guess I'd begrudgingly go with Big Ben. This is
Come on,
I thought
Rich.
we just
It's
talked
Mac
about
Jones.
all the three wides we were going to
Jones.
see. Come
Oh,
on,
man,
let's go. Some peer
I-
pressure.
It's Mac Jones, Rich. Come on.
Neither of these are good options. Can you start both? Can you make a Voltron, Can you make a super flex of the super flex? Like,
Can
just
you with
put
those
them
two
together?
guys? I don't think you can. I think you get like an arm and like a half a toe.
I don't think either
don't think you
guy's
can.
been higher than QB24 at all any week. I guess. All right, fine. I guess Mac Jones, but I mean,
Good.
neither
I
of these
pressured
guys are
you
going
into
to be
Correct.
Correct.
neither of these guys are going to be in any of your guys' top 25.
No, well, that's why we're asking it. Look, there's been a lot of quarterback injuries here these last few weeks, and
That's
people
fair.
in Superflex leagues are having
I'd
to
rather
make
play
these kinds of
Jakobi
decisions.
Brissett than both those guys.
Oh, that's fair. Would you agree with that sentiment, Andrew?
I got Mac Jones and Brissett back to back. So
Yeah, but
I'm
which
gonna
order?
be a homer and root for Mac Jones.
All right. At
Oh,
least
you're
you admit
a
it.
Patriots dude. All right, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
So am I,
At
unfortunately.
least
so
Brissett
that's
can
it.
run around. I'll take Brissett.
There you go. You know what? Brissett looked okay last week. And he played with heart. Let me tell you, man. He took some shots in that game, boys. He did. I mean, can we just pour a little out for our boy, Jakobi Brissett? Because that dude was taking some shots in that game. He got up and answered the bell every single time. I was very impressed by what he did there. All right, let's talk about tight end right now. I can't fade anybody in tight end because there's not enough to fade. Let's just talk about the guys on the fringe and who we want to start here. Robert Tunyon's at 12, Jared Cooks at 13, Gesicki, Conklin, Austin Hooper, Hunter Henry, Dawson Knox, quietly productive last couple weeks versus Houston, and then Jonnu Smith. Tyler Conklin or Dawson Knox? Who would you rather start? Andrew, we'll start with you on this one.
So their usage is like almost identical across the board. If you look at, routes run per dropback, you look at their target share in the offense, it's all pretty similar and pretty stagnant. I know that Tyler Conklin had the bigger game last week, and I know that Dawson Knox has also been pretty hot when it comes to touchdown production. So for me, I'm kind of looking at it from an offensive whole and the matchup. So I'm going to lean towards Dawson Knox. I think the Texans is a better matchup for him. The Texans have allowed the fourth most fantasy points to tight ends since the start of the year, and Dawson Knox ranks top 10 in total routes run among all tight ends. So the percentages are similar because the Viking between Conklin and Knox based on the offenses they play in, but because we know the Bills throw significantly more than almost any other team in the NFL, Knox is getting an overall bump in terms of routes run. I mean, his routes run is like up with Stephon Diggs on the Bills. So he's like a very integral part of that offense. And one thing to note, I hate to hamper down on the Tyler Conklin love, but Chris Herndon did play more in week 3. And he also got traded. I'm not saying this because he's an option, but
no, I understand.
He's
Slowly
starting
working
to,
his way.
he's starting to kind of get more acclimated into the offense after they traded for him, because we've always seen this team traditionally use 2 tight ends, and also Herndon's increase in play also may have an effect on why we didn't see as much of KJ Osborne in last week's game as well. So it's close, but I'm going to go lean towards Dawson Knox. He also has Josh Allen throwing him the ball, so I prefer that.
Rich, do you have a favorite streaming option at tight end this week?
Oh boy, it is rough. I think Dawson Knox is a good one if he's picked up there. I mean, he's now scored a touchdown in 4 of his past 6 games going back to last year too.
Right.
So he's fine in the end zone. You get that Josh Allen attachment. Sometimes it's all you need. I mean, Robert Tonyan lived this way last year. Just kind of you might not get any targets, you might not get a lot of yards, but if you can just score, in more of your games than not, you're going to be okay at tight end. At least give you something. Whereas everyone else is kind of a grab bag, that could give you really that don't even have like scoring upside. When you talk about some of these guys that you get in the depth of this position. I mean, I don't know if you're trying to chase the Gesicki targets from Brissett, if you think those are real.
Could be.
It could be. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those
be.
guys. Conklin's been out there, and like maybe the game environment is good again because that game could potentially go back and forth. The Browns defense looked great the last 6 quarters when they faced Justin Fields and Davis Mills, but the first 6 quarters versus Tyrod Taylor and Patrick Mahomes, they weren't that hot. So we'll kind of maybe see what's real there this week against a team that is a functioning quarterback. But it looks like the Conklin Osborne thing, it's going to be like kind of either or, right? Like because no one's like playing time like dipped or anything. It just was Osborne was the guy the first 2 games that got the targets, and then last week it was Conklin. So it's like they probably won't coexist ever. It'll probably be one or the other. So you're gonna have to do this thing where you pick as an Osborne game or Conklin game, which good luck if you're gonna guess that before going into a game. But yeah, I think Knox is probably the most appealing of those guys, just because you're gonna attach it to one of the top quarterbacks and he's scoring touchdowns.
Makes me happy because I just picked up Knox this morning in 4 leagues because of having some tight end issues. So I see it the same way. At least I hope that it all comes to fruition and these good trends continue. And as Andrew astutely pointed out, I mean, the Bills are throwing the ball a ton. That at least gives them more opportunities, and that's all we can ask for. Now we come to the opportunity of the show to give our must-start and must-sit of the week. I'll kick things off for us here. I'm going to kick things off with a wide receiver, and we keep trying to get Tim Patrick some more love. We keep saying Tim Patrick doesn't get enough love because his name is Tim Patrick. It's not something cool like Ramondre Stevenson. It doesn't have a cool ring to it. So one of our listeners brought up to me like, hey, well, Robert Patrick was the Terminator in the second Terminator movie. So I'm going to call him now the Timinator. That's right. The Timinator, Tim Patrick, must start of the week. As Rich pointed out before, no KJ Hamler, no Jerry Jeudy. Yes, he's thread the needle quite a bit and made the most of the targets he's getting, but there seems to be even a path for more. Love the matchup he's got this week as well. Baltimore has not played well in the secondary so far this year. So give me Tim Patrick. Rich, who is your must-start player of the week?
My guy is Odell Beckham. I think you look at Odell Beckham, he came back last week and was just right in back as the alpha receiver. He was in on 85% of team dropbacks. He led the team with a 31% team target share, had 5 catches for 77 yards. Now he's going against the Minnesota team that's already allowed top 30 scoring weeks and huge weeks to Jamar Chase, 100 yards and a touchdown, DeAndre Hopkins, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. They've allowed 11 yards per target to all opposing wide receivers, just 31st in the NFL. Seeing him checking in early rankings, having right around wide receiver 30-ish. I'm way above that. I feel really good about Odell Beckham, and maybe if the field feels this way, maybe he'll be a good little DFS play too this week.
No, there you have it. All right, who is your must-start, Andrew, of the week?
Zack Moss. Just look at that really, really high implied team total and fire him up.
All right, who is the must-sit of the week? And we'll go back the other way. Andrew, who you got?
For me, it's Jonnu Smith. And I know we talked about the Patriots and Rich hit on how they're actually more efficient in 11 personnel, or they have a higher success rate in 11 personnel versus 12 personnel. And it's interesting because we figured that they were going to be this heavy, run 12 personnel as like a base package, but it's actually gone down since the beginning of the year. Like week 1, it was.
I think they were when they thought Cam Newton was going to be the quarterback.
Yeah, they were at 49. So week 1 they were 49%. It went down to 23% in week 2, and then it went all the way down to 10% in week 3. So Jonnu Smith is kind of like the odd man out. So he has a really high target rate per route run. So when he is on the field, like they are throwing him the ball, but he's buried in terms of routes run per team drop back at 36%. Like that's not the range in which you want to be playing any sort of tight end. Like you want your tight ends at least around that 70% parameter, and then maybe you'll stand like a chance at them getting into some production, where if you're like half of that, it's just not going to happen. So in a game where we kind of can envision the game script looking a lot like it did last week for New England, Jonnu Smith, yeah, sure, he'll get a couple targets when he's on the field, but it seems like they're going to be fine rolling out 3 wide with Bourne, with Aguilar, with Meyers. They got to get speed, and then using Hunter Henry as the primary tight end in 11 personnel. So Jonnu Smith, I don't think he's like a red out drop, because I do like the fact that he is being targeted a lot on a per route run basis, but he's not playing enough. Like, frankly, we have to see him have an expanded role in the offense. And again, it's obviously not great that he keeps dropping the balls that are thrown his way.
or tossing them to the defender behind him.
Yes.
Rich, do you have a must sit this week?
I think your guy's the most obvious one. I'll go with Javonte Williams. I think that we're going to see this split kind of really play out this week. That it's been kind of masked by the game scripts the Broncos have been in. But I actually do believe there's a clear 1A, and it's Melvin Gordon. It's looked like a split more or less because the touches have been pretty equal, but the routes run have been completely skewed in Melvin Gordon's favor, and because of the game scripts, We've seen Javonte Williams get 44% of his touches in what kind of is a quote-unquote garbage time, where the win probability is 80 to 95% for the Broncos. So I think that with the Ravens kind of making this a more neutral game, maybe a little bit tougher opponent, that this is a week where we won't see Javonte Williams kind of have like that fringe flex appeal.
All right, for me, it's Damien Harris. Sorry, Damien, you got to sit this week. It's not a good matchup against Tampa. I know last week wasn't thrilling either. After this, it gets better. I mentioned yesterday on the trade show, it's a good opportunity to maybe buy low on Damien Harris right now, but this is not going to be the week here that you're going to want to throw him out there. Look for better options if you can. Gentlemen, before we get out of here real quick, let's touch on Thursday Night Football. We're going to have the Bengals hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jags obviously struggling with the turnovers this year, and on top of that, the Bengals defense playing pretty well. I think they're going to be a popular streamer this week if you're looking to pick up a defense, and I can understand why. Even going back to that game last year against Pittsburgh, that Bengals defense that had been pretty awful started to have a little bit more respect for itself towards the end of 2020. But let's switch gears on the other side of this real quick. Rich, I'm going to ask you a question. Who is your favorite Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver to start in this game?
I'm just going to get old man Marv, man. It's just... He's getting the targets. He's been the most productive guy. Shark's getting all the prayer yards, but old man Marv is getting is really been the most steady guy.
Give me a line in your head, Andrew, of your expectation for James Robinson in Thursday night's game.
It's not going to be what it was last week. That's for sure. I do not expect another top 5 finish for James Robinson. I know he took advantage. Arizona Cardinals defense has not been great against running backs that had allowed the highest explosive run rate, and we saw James Robinson after a abysmal first half when he rushed for 8 yards really kind of break out in the second half. Carlos Hyde was basically outproducing him in the first half, which is never a good sign. And you look at these Bengals defense, like you mentioned, we talk about how Tampa Bay is just impossible to run the ball against. Cincinnati ranks number 1 in fewest rushing yards allowed before contact per attempt, 5th in yards per carry allowed. Like, their run defense has been really good. Again, it has to do with who they've played so far, but the James Robinson has definitely not shown us enough or proven enough this year in a somewhat of a committee with Carlos Hyde that he can overcome any type of bad matchup. Like, he needs kind of the perfect scenario, and I also don't think that his 6 targets and 6 receptions are going to come back next week or in this game. You look at the way that the target share is kind of flattened out between Marvin Jones, who also has the lead on the targets, but Shenault and Chark have been more around that 17% mark. They were both down at 11% in week 3, which kind of just seems more like an outlier. Like, James Robinson's not going to get 6 targets every week. It's not happening, especially because his routes run per dropback fell. So it was at 63% in week 2. It fell down to 40% in week 3. So banking on him running less routes and then catching more passes just doesn't make any sense. So James Robinson, I think he is a sell high guy after that RB top 5 finish. I would try to move him before Thursday night because I feel like you won't be able to move him after Thursday night.
All right. Don't forget, everybody, head over to fantasypros.com/contest to get involved in that Kyler Murray football we're trying to give away. And when you join our YouTube channel by subscribing at youtube.com/fantasypros, when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you get 3x entry into that contest. Also, make sure you sync all of your teams to fantasypros.com/myplaybook. My Playbook has all the tools you need, some of the tools that we're using here for the shows, and also Autopilot, which will help get you out of a lot of binds. Check out Autopilot over at My Playbook. Again, making the moves when you can't make them. That's what Autopilot does for you. And of course, Lord Reeves on Twitter, Rich Hribar, giving great analysis as always. I'm so grateful that you gave us the time, Rich. You can check out all his work at Sharp Football. Rich, anything else going on you want to plug here today, my friend?
No, you pretty much hit it, man. At Lord Reeves on Twitter, Sharp Football Analysis. Check out the weekly worksheet. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Always a pleasure. And, of course, you can check out Andrew Erickson's Juju Smith-Schuster remix October 1st when it drops everywhere and on Apple Music and, of course, the Spotify, too. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. And don't forget, before we go, the Magic Spoon. You got to get the Magic Spoon. I almost forgot. Again, MagicSpoon.com. Use that promo code FantasyPros to get $5 off your first order. Now that you have a bowl of cereal, now I will let you go. I don't want you to leave on an empty stomach, just like my grandmother would never let you leave her house on an empty stomach. Now, that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Rich and Andrew, I'm Joey P. We will see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.